Welcome, everyone. My name is Christopher Catta, and I'm your host for this webinar this evening. Our topic today is a coping framework to empower yourself, and it's presented by our guest speaker, Eleanor Silverberg. And this is part of a longer series on dementia and elder abuse. And it's actually one of 3 sessions that Eleanor is going to be presenting over the next few weeks. And that towards the end of this webinar, Eleanor will introduce those other topics and the dates for those upcoming sessions. If you have questions during this webinar, there is a Q&A feature in Zoom, and you can type your questions in there. And at the end of Eleanor's presentation, we'll go through those questions and Eleanor can respond to those. And of course, Eleanor will provide her contact information at the end as well, so that if you're interested in learning more, you can follow up with her directly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eleanor to take us through this presentation.
Well, thank you, Chris, for the introduction, and I will take it from here. I welcome you to this presentation. It's a very important topic on abuse prevention. This topic will help you to get a coping framework to empower yourself. I'm Eleanor Silverberg. I'm a social worker in private practice, and I specialize in dementia, caregiving, and grief. And I'm the founder of Jade Self-Development Coaching. My expertise is Alzheimer's or related dementia and assisting family caregivers and processing grief due to situational loss. So we're going to be talking today about abuse prevention, providing you with insight on abuse and describing an empowering framework to assist you to cope through challenging situations. You're going to possess tools to cope well, because it's vital to have coping tools to prevent abuse. So what is abuse and how can you prevent it? Abuse is treating people with cruelty or violence. And there can be an isolated incident of being abusive, or it is especially serious if it's occurring regularly or repeatedly. There's different forms of abuse. There's physical abuse that involves hitting, kicking, biting, psychological, verbal abuse, putting others down, and financial abuse. Those are a few types. There's another type that involves abusing yourself. So I'm going to ask you, think about this. True or false? It is selfish to care for myself. Many people, especially caregivers, are so busy caring for others that often the caregiver themselves are neglected. Can you relate to that? It is selfish to care for myself. Do you put others before yourself? Abusing yourself is self-abuse is a form of abuse that you may not have heard of. It's really self-neglect or self-deprecation. And it's putting others before yourself, and it's undervaluing yourself. And you may have maladaptive coping skills, such as drinking a lot, alcohol, or abuse of pills, especially if they're non-prescriptive drugs. And you're actually abusing yourself. So self-abuse is a form of abuse. So how can you prevent it? You can prevent it by having good coping skills and being aware and paying attention. Here is a regimen to juggle for taking care of yourself and others. And it's from my book, Keeping It Together. And what I use here is the metaphors of cocoon, butterfly, butterfly, and caterpillars. And in this diagram of a stick person that has caterpillar legs and the head of a cocoon, it's to show transformation by taking on a regimen and juggling this regimen. And this regimen has 3 elements: self-care and caring, and one that you might not have thought of, grieving. So let me explain briefly. Caring is when you're caring for others, for caregivers of people with dementia or other related chronic illnesses. Or caring can also be work that you're doing, any responsibilities that you have that you take on and take on responsibly. Self-care is, I think you've heard that expression many times. Self-care is taking means of taking care of yourself. And grieving is something that as we get on, and even more so even into our older years, we experience many losses. And grieving is a part of of life, really. And processing the grief is a means of strengthening your resiliency. So if you juggle these 3 elements, it strengthens your resiliency. And the 3A coping framework is the framework that I talk about in the title of empowering yourself to cope. Using this framework, the components of the 3A coping framework are acknowledge, assess, assist. And the intention of using these components is having the ability to self-monitor with self-awareness. Now, describing the 3 components are, for acknowledge, is acknowledge the reality, face the reality of your circumstances, and assess the impact, and assist with strategies. And they are visually, you see that they are in 3 interconnected ovals, and to show that they can work simultaneously. The components are not only working independently. You assist by acknowledging and assessing. There are assumptions that go with applying the components of acknowledge, assess, assist. The one assumption is that where there is struggle, challenge, and adversity, there is situational loss. And often in dealing with illness such as dementia or other chronic illnesses, related illnesses, there is situational loss. There is struggle, challenge, and adversity. Situational loss defined is the loss of a person, thing, or quality resulting from alteration of a life situation, including changes related to illness, body image, environment, and death. So you're facing a difficult challenge. And what you may lose sight of is that situational loss is involved in the loss of a person to illness. You're losing that person. You may lose, it may involve losing a job or losing your home if you have to relocate. So that's loss of a thing, loss of finances, or quality. You might lose qualities such as freedom and loss of control of the situation, or loss of calm. And the circumstances that create these losses could be due to illness, body image, environment, change in environment, and death. So that's an explanation of situational loss. Now, there's types of situational loss. You can start with the initial loss, and that, such as illness, and it triggers other losses, subsequent losses, abstract losses, past losses. And there may also be other losses, multiple losses. So let me explain that further by using an example, the case of Jean, the caregiver, who is a caregiver for her spouse, Jack. So it's explained the scenario is that Jack, at 59 years old, suffers a traumatic brain injury from a car accident a year ago. In addition to mobility issues, the brain damage from the accident has affected his memory and daily functioning. So let's describe the types of losses. So the initial losses is Jack's health. And then a subsequent loss is a loss that is triggered from the initial loss, such as financial loss, lifestyle loss due to job loss. And then you have to think that there can be losses that you might not even consider at all as a loss, such as social loss that this initial loss triggers. For instance, this couple used to go square dancing every week, and over time they just couldn't do that anymore. So that's a loss. And then abstract loss, loss of future retirement, travel plans that they were making. And there's a German word for that, Sehnsucht, which means unsatisfied desire. There isn't really a word for that in English, except kind of the loss of ideal, or like as is stated here, loss of future plans. And then loss of calm. Abstract losses are losses that you can't really touch, but they actually impact greatly. Then there's multiple loss, which really does not have anything to do with the initial loss, but you're experiencing losses, other kinds of losses, such as in Jack's case and Jean's case, there was a death of a close family member. So there's another loss. And the daughter relocated due to work to go to another city. So that might have been a good opportunity, but it was a loss for Jane and Jack. And past losses that occur in the present can create past losses to resurface, such as in Jean's case, her estranged relationship with her sister, that the estrangement occurred in 15 years ago, and it comes back up, especially if it hasn't been resolved. And often we losses do go unresolved for a period of time, and they don't disappear. They can come back. So past losses often will resurface during an initial loss, present loss. So let me just give you a quiz on this before we continue with acknowledge, assess, assist, and carry on. Which of the following, now just think about this, and would you identify as losses for a 56-year-old woman who is providing care and support for her mother who lives alone and was recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease? Her mother's memory is quite impaired and is not eating properly. So here's your choices: the loss, mother's illness, loss of pet dog getting lost and not returning home, constantly thinking and worrying about her mother, thinking back about her divorce that occurred 10 years ago, and not taking a job promotion that would pay more, but would require more hours taking away from caregiving. Or F, all of the above. Think a second. If you said F, all of the above, you're correct. Just as we spoke about in the previous slide, mother's illness was the initial loss. And then there was a multiple loss with also her pet dog getting lost and not returning home. Constantly thinking and worrying about her mother. That's a loss of focus, a loss of concentration, a loss of calm. Thinking back about her divorce that occurred 10 years ago, a past loss that resurfaces. Not taking a job promotion that would pay more but would require more hours taken away from caregiving is a subsequent loss of finances, loss of opportunity. So I hope that makes clear for you about acknowledging all the different kinds of losses that you experience or may be experiencing based on your circumstances. So in applying acknowledge, assess, assist, there's another assumption that grief is a reaction to situational loss, and it is unique to the individual. And grief is not just about death. It's an experience that occurs in many situations, including the loss of a person to dementia and other chronic conditions. And remember that it is unique to the individual, that it in a family that does experience dementia in the family, one family member may be reacting and coping with it, or have coping strategies that are different. And so the way one person in the family reacts is going to be quite different than another person, and to respect that. Now, there can be different ways of experiencing grief. A common way of experiencing it is by feeling it through emotions. And here's an emotional whirlwind with a number of different emotions and reactions. And one or two or three of them may be more prominent than others. But you can be experiencing many emotions at one time. And again, one being more prominent than the other one. And there's also an intensity in how extreme you may be feeling the emotion. Is it anger that you're feeling? Or is it rage? Are you afraid? Or are you petrified? So it's different intensities as well. And it is good to be in touch, acknowledge and assess. You are assisting by acknowledging and assessing, by being aware and self-monitoring. And so you can know what you need to work on, if it's anger or if it's guilt. Look at this emotional whirlwind. What shouts out at you that you are feeling? Is it guilt? Do you feel lonely? Isolated? Do you feel overwhelmed? Or do you not know? Are you not in touch with what you're feeling? Just be aware. Acknowledge if you're not aware, and then you can work at that, at getting in touch with your emotions as well. Or you may be in touch with one emotion, but not be aware or realize that there are other emotions you're feeling as well at the same time. Okay. So what emotions are coming out for you? Also realize and acknowledge how these emotions are being played out. Is anger being played out in a hurtful way? In a hurtful way to yourself, or in a hurtful way as a caregiver to the person you're caring for? It's good to express, but if it's being done in a harmful way, this is something that you can monitor and be aware of and stop. The next assumption is that there are potential benefits to processing loss and grief. By facing what you are experiencing and working through what your reaction is, the impact, there can be relief, resolution, peace, comfort, truth, clarity, and strength and resiliency. These benefits really make it worthwhile to acknowledge and assess what you're going through. So the 3A coping framework is a tool for coping. The components, acknowledge, assess, assist, are action words for self-monitoring with self-awareness. You can assist by using strategies such as grief strategies that are commonly used in death circumstances can be used in other circumstances where there is loss. So you can and you can normalize what you're experiencing and your reaction based on the context of what you are experiencing. And you may get relief from that. So here is the situational loss process with everything really laid out. The initial loss, the related and unrelated losses, like the subsequent abstract multiple past losses. So you see the arrow from the initial loss to the related and unrelated losses, and that they lead to the reaction. You notice that I didn't put grief, because grief is really like depression or stress. It doesn't give as much information as when you actually give specific reaction, like, is it anger? Is it guilt? Am I sleeping a lot? That's more a behavior. Am I eating a lot? Am I not eating at all? That's your reaction to the circumstances. And then that leads to how you react, leads to coping, and coping using assisting strategies, and like grief strategies and other kinds of strategies that you can, if you build up your coping strategies, that'll even affect how you react, because you are strengthened with good coping tools. So I hope that has been helpful for you in abuse prevention and learning about a framework to empower you to cope, the 3A coping framework: acknowledge, assess, assist. Now, continuing the Zoom webinar series, next week, Wednesday, November the 3rd, at 7 p.m., we will be continuing with strengthening your resiliency with self-nurturing strategies. So we'll be really looking at the self-abuse when in this, that will help to prevent other forms of abuse. And then on November the 10th, the following Wednesday at 7 p.m., we're going to focus on mindfulness, with staying grounded with mindfulness. And you can register at www.dementiaandelderabuse.com. And I'll be presenting them. You can, if you want more information on my work, go to eleanorsilverberg.com. You can always contact me at hello@eleanorsilverberg.com or call 647-624-5677. I also offer a complimentary introductory half-hour telephone chat. So thank you for your time, and I hope this has been helpful for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I checked to see if we had any questions, and tonight we don't have any to ask for Eleanor. But if you do have questions for Eleanor and you want to ask them at a later time, by all means, feel free to email Eleanor directly at her email address that you see on screen. And we encourage you to register for the next 2 upcoming webinars that Eleanor is going to be presenting on November 10th, or November 3rd and November 10th. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you next week.